good afternoon. Yeah, this is almost like a law firm conference with all these laws that are coming by, but this one actually may affect the AMS-IX directly, because basically the EU is bringing some telco proposals forward that might actually be the end of internet exchange points as we know them, which is a bit weird because, well, we used to always think that it was a sign of what we wanted, a good competitive market where internet exchanges, etc., are a sign of how well things work. To give you a bit of a background, I actually like the EU. I do a lot of policy. I'm a partner at Stratix, and Stratix is a small Dutch consulting firm. We advise mostly governments and smaller parties on the varieties of telecom and digital regulation. I recently did a nice facts and figures report on data centers in the region of Amsterdam, showing that some official statistics were wrong, and that also in the industry people were blowing themselves up a bit, whereas they were a lot smaller, like quoting that they had a 72 megawatt data center, which actually did less than 1 megawatt of power. But you know, policy-wise, that has effects. July 12th, the Metropolitan Region of Amsterdam will hold a session on that. If you'd like that kind of thing, be welcome. This debate about the gigabit infrastructure proposals starts with, well, something that the gentleman from Deutsche Telekom describes best. The region with the best connectivity will be the region with the best innovation. And, you know, it's particularly interesting that he makes that point, because I will show later on some statistics on what the best regions are. And these have to do with the EU Digital Decade goals. And, you know, the basis of it is basically better connectivity for better lives, which is a paraphrasing of the OECD slogan of better policies for better lives. But the program says that we want all populated areas to have high-speed broadband and wireless, and all market actors benefiting from it should contribute fair and proportionately to public goods, services, and infrastructures. Unfortunately, the telcos and some people in the European Commission only heard about the infrastructures bit and forgot the public goods and services bit that the other actors put into this declaration. And what are the targets? Well, we want a skilled population. We want digital transformation of business. We want the digitalization of public services. You know, all these things that are like, you know, mom and apple pie, stuff that we all want. And of course, we want secure, resilient, performant, and sustainable digital infrastructures. And that means basically everybody should get a gigabit by 2030 all over the EU. Except we may not get there because some countries are a bit behind. The innovation leaders are Spain, Sweden, Portugal, and France. Almost everybody can get gigabit fiber there now, and sometimes even a bit more than a gigabit. Also, some countries which are a bit behind. Germany, Italy, Greece, Austria. Some countries will actually be quick enough to catch up by 2030. Belgium seems to be doing pretty well. The Netherlands is a bit in the middle, but you know, by 2028 we'll be done. And most of our farms, Stratix also follows broadband rollout in the Netherlands, and most of our farms will be done by next year. So, you know, it's quite interesting that Deutsche Telekom said that you need good infrastructure for good innovation, because, well, they only started last year. So the European Commission is worried because 10% of Europeans may not get gigabit. And so they come up with 3 proposals, and at first sight they look logical. And I'm actually a big fan of the EU. I've done EU negotiations, and it's really fun sitting in a room with 27 countries negotiating public policy. You may not think that this is fun, but actually it is. Because if somebody says something dumb, there are actually 26 other countries in the room who will point that out. So we once did the EU Data Retention Act negotiations, and there was this lady from the Finnish Bureau of Investigations who actually had a FreeBSD logo on her laptop, and she said, "I am from the other FBI." And she actually knew everything there was about data and data retention. And then you would have a Luxembourg judge as the chairman, because Luxembourg was chairing it and they didn't have enough people, so they got a judge to do it. And he would just look at her whenever somebody said something, and if she nodded, that person knows what he's talking about, then it would be, thank you for your contribution, and otherwise it would be, thank you. Minor difference. Anyways, the Gigabit Infrastructure Act sounds good. Let's make it easier to roll out networks. Who can be against that? You know, it's a successor to the Broadband Cost Reduction Directive, which also has a great title. It is a direct effect act, so you can't nationally muck it up. A single portal for all permits. Access to public infrastructure, so if the electricity firm of your country has dug a nice little hole where you can also lay your fibers through, then you're allowed to use it. Sounds all great. And a gigabit recommendation. Under what conditions do you need to give access to your network and to somebody else's network? We have very different rules all across Europe. Let's make them uniform. And then there's a questionnaire because, well, we don't know everything yet. How do you see the future of the connectivity sector? That sounds great. Let's tell us about how the technology, the market develops, what is fair for consumers, what are the barriers to the single market, and how can we make all the digital players pay a fair contribution? It all sounds so nice. Except the Gigabit Infrastructure Act won't actually make rolling out fiber faster because a lot of countries are done already. So municipalities, and full disclosure, and I forgot this last weekend and now again, I represent the Dutch municipalities on this dossier. They hire me for a day a week to follow this kind of stuff. On some of the Fairshare future connectivity stuff, I've worked with European regulators, but also done some consulting for Google and the like. So, but well, I've been writing about this for 15 years, so if you don't believe me that I've been saying the same thing all over, just look back. Anyways, the Act wants a single portal. But if you have to build that as a country, but you're already done with building fiber, how is that single portal actually going to give you faster fiber? Because Spain is 90% done. How much more fiber is this going to create? Yes, maybe in Germany, but in the Netherlands, we're done in 2028. And it doesn't cooperate with all the other stuff that we need to do in the ground, and that's actually quite a lot of stuff. And there's also a 3-month standstill period involved. So basically, when you want to dig to build out your network, you have to announce that, and for 3 months, your competitors can say that they want to join you with the rollout. And then you can negotiate with them for 6 months about the terms and conditions, and by that time, whatever advantage you had, you have just lost. So the gigabit recommendation is more a way of not regulating big telcos anymore, because if there's a prospect of infrastructure competition, regulators aren't allowed to regulate. So it's not when there is actual infrastructure competition that they're not allowed to regulate anymore, which could sound kind of logical. Now it's when there's a prospect. So you just get somebody to announce that they are going to roll out fiber to the home at some point in the near future, somewhere, maybe. And then you can't regulate anymore. And at €2 or €5 per line per month, that could be real money for telcos, you know, with 4 million, 8 million households. That's real money. So I actually think that this is the big money maker. And the rest might just be a diversion, but we never know. In the consultation, it asks nice questions, but it primarily seems to be pointing at big tech as a source for investment and poor little telcos who can't run their networks. And if you don't trust me, just read the reactions that the European regulators wrote together, because they got together with 27 and they wrote a couple of really nasty documents saying, European Commission, what the hell are you doing? This is just dumb. But then in very polite regulatory terms. So the questionnaire, which I will focus on a bit most, and the fair share debate. It mixes infrastructure and all kinds of services. It thinks that big telcos only invest, whereas the statistics that the big telcos themselves publish yearly show that actually most of the fiber to the home investment came from alternative networks. So not ethno members, but other networks, which is nice, but the European Commission seems to not have caught on. It wants a single market, which sounds great, let's offer our services everywhere in Europe, but we already have that. But ask the people who use Orange in Belgium whether they can get 2 gigabit for 34.99 as Orange offers in France, and the answer is no. And it certainly doesn't come with TV and telephony to 100 countries and etc. And of course, there's all kinds of other stuff. Is the questionnaire really that bad? Yes. It asks, how much did you invest to handle traffic growth? And it asks, how much did this exceed your plans? But you can't have a negative value. So you can have only an exceeding of your investment plans. And this is all because nice EU telcos say they can't handle traffic anymore, and therefore they need to get rid of transit. And as a result, they will also get rid of peering, because transit comes first, and then you start to peer. And that's when you start to establish internet exchange points. So they want to move to the model we had for telephony, which is called sending party network pays. And, it's really expensive to handle all your traffic. Telefonica had it calculated 40 billion a year. At no 35 billion a year. And look, it's these guys who are doing most of the traffic. They use Sandfine statistics. The Sandfine actually showed that their proportion is decreasing is another thing. But it's big tech, and big tech is American, so they're bad. And they want someone else to pay for CapEx. And a brilliant thing is, this, the 55 million pays for all the networks. So basically, they want somebody else to pay for the networks and then still remain 100% owner of it, which I also want, for my mortgage and other stuff. And how much? Well, the CEO of BT said, every terabit costs us £50 million, which means that the CEO of KPN in the Netherlands is a bloody idiot. Because, okay, I don't think I have it here. Anyways, he sells that traffic for 12 million to his ISP customers. So he shortchanges his shareholders by 38 million or something. Or maybe this guy just doesn't know what he's talking about, but he also said that 28 terabit was impossible. If it grew any more, they couldn't handle it on their network. So if anybody here has a network that can't handle 28 terabit, please raise your hand. There will be a salesperson from Nokia Extreme Juniper chasing you down all the way during drinks and dinner. Yes, please raise your hand if you can't handle. Well, nobody. Telcos even hire economists and then go like, yes, but this man works at Toulouse University, Toulouse School of Economics, and they got a Nobel Prize. No, one of their professors got a Nobel Prize, and these guys are free riding. So I actually asked for the retraction of some papers. You can't get any academic to do that. I once wrote an explanation of how peering and transit works, which is on Ars Technica. But basically what the telcos now want is that anybody who does more than 5% of traffic should pay. And I don't know if that's bytes or capacity, but in most countries, that's if you do more than 1 terabit, you're doomed. Oh, and they want about 9 figures to 10 figures, so between 5 and 15 billion. So start calculating. And weirdly enough, they do tell investors and regulators, the ones who you can't lie to. You can lie to politicians, but you can't lie to your investors nor your regulator, that actually gigabytes don't matter, gigabits do. This is BT in their Investors Day presentation. And they actually say, look, Corona and all that kind of stuff, we didn't really care. Yes, there were more bytes during the day, but just look, peak didn't change. Vodafone, come on, 50% traffic growth? No, nonsense. It was 2 to 3 years, 70%, but CapEx was stable, and even better, costs of a gigabyte have fallen faster than traffic growth. Hey, if you're telling your investors this, that actually it's getting cheaper to handle traffic, then why are you telling the European Commission the opposite? Oh yeah, here's the slide of KPN. 6 megabits per client we need, and 21% growth, and that's €1.39. Hey, if you can handle this traffic, just do the math, it's about 12, 13 million to handle a terabit, not 15 million pounds, like BT said. And even this Dutch ISP say is too much and not fair and etc. But at least it gives us a baseline. And if this goes triple in 2030, we talk about 18 to 25 megabit per customer. So the whole of the Netherlands, 200 terabit at most. One Nokia switch. And there's some people from Nokia here who want to handle the whole Netherlands in one box, maybe. Don't do it. But anyways, the effect will be a termination fee, a monopoly. And that's the opposite of how the internet works. The internet started with universities who all argued over who should pay for the connection. And that becomes civil war, basically, because nobody can agree on which professor offered more and who's more brilliant, and etc. So the result was everybody pays for their own network. And that's what the rest of the internet was built on. Instead of, if I go from LeaseWeb over Orange to Telecom Italia, each one asking each other how much they need to pay, you pay your network, I pay mine, and if I need transit, yes, we pay the guy in the middle. But of course, that also means that both of us will be trying to find a route around the guy in the middle, because why would you pay transit if you can go and do it over an internet exchange like the AMS-IX, which is why we're all here. And that created market dynamics and made that transit prices drop all the time. And, and everybody can be a network. The Dutch tax service runs their own ASN, Dutch Shell, every bank, the Department of Defense. And you can have a lot of fun. And it's a lot cheaper if it's competitive. Oh, I still have the old number for Deutsche Telekom. I actually learned that Deutsche Telekom says it's 20 megabits for cents per megabit for its transit. But if it basically is only termination, then it amounts up to 80 cents per megabit, because if that's all the traffic you have for them, the price doesn't change. Anyways, sending party network pays is a mess. You can ask any telephone regulation person, and I've done the papers for the OECD on it. Orange in NL was a really good example in like 2001. They had a budget shortage because they didn't have enough GSM customers on their shiny new network. So they raised their termination fee to 25 cents a minute. So if you called the customer of theirs on their network, you had to pay 25 cents, whereas the other networks charged 20. That was easy money. So anybody here who has a budget shortage, just raise your fees for incoming IP traffic from one of the big telcos, Coal, Orange, KPN, Deutsche Telekom, etc., who are all proposing this, and say, well, I see traffic coming from you. I've just raised my termination rate. Would you please pay? Of course, it doesn't work like that. This leads to fraud. This leads to all kinds of nonsense, which we don't want. But it also leads to not being able to determine anymore the routes that your traffic take. And it also means that you don't need an internet exchange point anymore. Because if the terminating network determines where the traffic is coming from, then why would you build an infrastructure that would optimize how that traffic is exchanged? And we've seen this in Switzerland. Swisscom decided that Deutsche Telekom would be its transit provider. What we didn't know is Deutsche Telekom actually paid them a kickback for all the traffic going to Swisscom. So that was already a termination fee. And the antitrust regulator actually fined them for it. In the end, everybody will end up paying more, and it will break how the internet works. And telcos are telling everybody like, oh, it won't hurt you, it will just hurt the Americans. But turns out we all use the Americans, and then if you use a CDN, well, they maybe are excluded, but not their customers. So anyways, and we already know big telco isn't nice because they don't really peer. In France, the regulator actually has the data, and it says most of it is private peering, more than 50%, and it's paid for. Up to several euro per megabit if you need to get it to some networks in France. Termination fee. And of course you can argue that you don't want it, but you might just end up in a situation that Deutsche Forschungsnetz had. And this I think is particularly nasty, and so that's why I call it out all the time. This is the German university network, pre-COVID. They had 1.1 terabit of traffic. They bought from 2 transit providers. They had peering with everybody. And then COVID came, and all those students went home. And all the students started following online classes through a video platform that's hosted on the events network. So they didn't use nasty American products. They used home-developed German quality product. Was that good enough for a German Deutsche Telekom? No. All other ISPs in Germany started to do PNIs, and you see a lot of them on the left. Vodafone, Telefonica, 1&1, all of them were like, of course we peer with you. You are the universities, we like students, we want them to be, they're our customers, we want them to be able to follow classes at home. Deutsche Telekom had 20% packet loss in its network, on its transit lines to Lümen and Telia, which I think have changed names again. But, well, anyways, no matter how they tried to negotiate, they couldn't get Deutsche Telekom to change it unless they paid a termination fee. And this is what I call abuse of market power. Unfortunately, nobody in Germany has yet regulated them. But that is what will be our future for all of us. Because if you don't pay, you lose 20% of your packets. That's the message they're sending. And that's already happening with some big telcos. The rest of us can work around it. So the proposals of the telcos are detrimental to the existence of IXPs. If you have to benefit, if you have a termination fee, you can't benefit from peering anymore. And there won't be optimized routing anymore. And there's no reason to have an AMS-IX. So, have a good general meeting.
Thanks, Rudolf. We've got time for just one question, if there's a quick one from anyone. Okay, well, Rudolf and Bert are going to be heading up in a few minutes, and I believe Mikhail might join you on the 5th floor. They will be having a Q&A session about this and other stuff. So they're titling it The EU from Digital Policy Leader to Bad Guy. So that's on the 5th floor for about half an hour between 4 and 4:30. That's for the people that won't be at the GM. Yeah, so that's your little plug for that. Okay, thank you again for both of you, Bert and Rudolf. Thank you.